Hey, I'm live. Yeah, I see there's already a few people in the stream. That's great to see. I know it's a little bit earlier than I typically go, you folks, but once again, I always appreciate you folks that spend your time and your day listen to me and the kind of stuff that I deal with. And today we're going to be talking to Gord MaGill. Now, me and Gord have known each other for quite a while. As with everything, though, we're human beings. We kind of, do our thing. We kind of went about our separate ways for a while, and
Well, it's
I
not
think
that. I got kicked off Twitter like 4 times.
well, yeah, well, that too, right? And that's another way you lose contact with things with all the cancel culture for sure. But I do remember, I think one of the early things that I seen was obviously, and I was like, I had to almost like, yeah, that's the Gord I know. Anyways, I saw that you were on Tucker Carlson. And I mean, Tucker Carlson, he's been on a whirlwind tour for sure. And he's obviously getting lots of attention. I actually did a live stream pertaining to his visit out west there when he was up in Canada and out in Alberta. And actually, it's funny because a lot of my content typically doesn't get a whole lot of notice. I don't do the clickbaity headlines and all that stuff that, people tend to do. But just by simple having Tucker Carlson in the title, yeah, my live stream went from just basically, a few hundred views here or there to like thousands of them. So Tucker Carlson's on the minds, obviously, of a lot of people, whether it's good or bad, right? But it was very interested to see you on there because I think it's really important, not just for the Canadian context, but as you know, and you're quite aware of this, is that the Freedom Convoy, it not only inspired a lot of Canadians, and we've all seen the video footage and all the supporters, but it also has inspired, similar kind of movements, around the Western world, basically, whether you're talking about the Dutch farmers or even some stuff that's happening in Germany, the Americans, they basically tried to replicate it, which is, as a Canadian, and I know you're originally a Canadian as well, but as a Canadian, I got to say, it's probably one of the few times in my lifetime where we actually led the Americans in any way in terms of, standing up and fighting for freedom. So, boy, that kind of got me right here, just, as a Canadian myself and as a truck driver. That was kind of a double whammy, right? It was like, wow, and of all people. But of course, you're probably familiar with this as well as a truck driver, and any other truck drivers right there that are watching this, and there probably will be a few for sure, is there's a certain mindset, not always, not all, right? There's exceptions and outliers, but the certain kind of a mindset of a truck driver is the person that typically you are for the most part isolated and alone, so you're kind of very independent. And as you know, if you get your deliveries loaded and delivered on time, it's like you don't even really have a boss per se, which is something that I personally really enjoy. One of the aspects about being a truck driver, and it's a very productive and somewhat thankless job. But I mean, without truck drivers, and I mention this to a lot of people all the time, everything that you can lay your eyes upon in this physical realm, right? It got there, by a truck. It sure might have been some trains and boats involved, but to get to the final destination, that, yeah, a truck was involved. So like I say, it can be a thankless job, but it's definitely something that's quite important. And I was proud to see the truck drivers stand up for the freedom. So I don't know if you want to just jump into that in terms of, the whole freedom movement and the Freedom Convoy and what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, well, first off, thanks for having me, Bennett. It's been a little while trying to tee this up. Busy lives, everyone's working and got family, and there's always so much going on in life, and as much as it might seem like we're pretty productive online, there's also lots of stuff going on out here in meat space. But thanks for making the time and having me on your show. Tucker Carlson. So I've been writing on the trucking industry sort of on and off since 2017. I've been a trucker most of my life. Started out in Ontario. I'm originally from Hamilton. One of my oldest best friends is from New Brunswick. I used to go out to visit him there a lot in a place called Upper Haynesville, getting down towards Millville and Akawik area.
Right.
Anyway, I did a lot of traveling. I've worked in a few different places around the world. So I started writing on it. And then Freedom Convoy happened. And I went to Ottawa to express solidarity with my fellow truckers and fellow Canadians. Even though I live in the United States now, I drove home, crossed the border, went to Ottawa. And I guess people saw some videos I'd posted on Twitter and started asking me about what was actually going on there. And I just sort of offered my opinion on what I saw about Freedom Convoy, the issues that Freedom Convoy was trying to address, and more importantly, disassembling the lies that were coming out about the Freedom Convoy, the blatant propaganda from the media. And I was offered the opportunity to write for Newsweek magazine here in the US, which I took, and I've been writing for them occasionally ever since. And last year, I became aware of the fact these 4 guys got arrested in Alberta and were still in prison, and nobody was talking about it. And so I started doing a little research on that, wrote a couple articles for Newsweek, and Tucker Carlson was doing his homework for his visit to Alberta, and his people reached out to me and said, hey, is there any more information you could share about this situation with the Coots guys and anything else you can tell us about Canada, Freedom Convoy? And I sort of helped them out. And then after a little while, they said, why don't you just come on the show? Like, let's talk about this. Those 4 guys, that's a pretty important deal. So I accepted the invite. I drove to his place in Maine, probably not too far from where you are in New Brunswick. And, just we had a chat for about half an hour, 40 minutes, and talked about the Coot situation and sort of wider problems in Canada. And then a week later, he was in Alberta, and he brought up the Coot situation directly to Danielle Smith. And then 2 weeks later, what do you know? 2 of the guys are out. The situation's still ongoing, and the government never sleeps, So last week they introduced this Online Harms Act, and now they're going to try and basically make thought crime illegal and pre-punish you for things you might do. If they convict you of advocating genocide with words, you can be put in jail for life. I have to wonder if that will apply to the folks that keep saying from the river to the sea. There are some who believe that to be a genocidal phrase. Something tells me it's not going to apply to them because that's not how politics works. But we live in very crazy times. It pains me as a Canadian, even as an expat, to see what's going on at home. I just went home yesterday. I drove to Ontario to take a friend of mine who was visiting me back to his place in Hamilton. And every time I go home, I get the heebie-jeebies, man. It just feels creepier and creepier.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And I'm glad you brought up the Bill C-63, because that's just the latest thing that I've been hammering away at this message for those who are willing to listen anyways, and which is obviously quite a minority of Canadians, to be honest with you. Everyone likes to play the left and right and the political game. I rise above that as much as I can. I talk about the current events and try to bring a philosophical, like a liberty-oriented lens to it. But yeah, this whole left versus right thing, it's, and I've watched my whole life, it's whether it's the conservatives or the liberals or whoever gains power.
A better way to think about that is left versus further left. there ain't much right going on.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Well, I mean, me as a libertarian, I look at things more from a, libertarian versus authoritarianism, because authoritarianism, just like in the household, authoritarian mommy or daddy, like, and really when you're talking about the political spectrum, you genuinely are talking about, dominant personality traits, and male versus female there. So conservatives would be kind of along the lines of your daddy, right? And the left, the liberals, would be more along the lines of mommy. So, nature versus nurture and all that stuff, right? Protector versus protector, provider, and nature and all that stuff. But once again, we both know, whether you were raised in, in any kind of household, or you at least know someone, that, mommy can be just as, evil as daddy. Matter of fact, the daddy might be a little bit more dominant in the physical space. But one thing I think we've all acknowledged, is the female side of things, the power of the playing with the emotions and emotional manipulation. Like, that's where they dominate severely. And that's the part that we're seeing today. And I try to point out to people all the time, I'm not a fan of either or, but one thing about the conservative or the right winger is there is no apprehension. You'll feel the ground trembling, when they're coming towards you. They're not shy about what their intentions are. But the people that are dominating the space today are people that have these leftist tendencies, as you speak of. And those are the ones that, just like Trudeau, he's a man, as far as I know, but he has very effeminate traits and characteristics that he brings to the table. So he's not going to, talk like the top man. No, he's going to pretend that he's going to control, dictate, and micromanage your life, but it's for your own good, right? Right? For your own.
Or as Peterson would put it, the devouring mother. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And, I think the more important thing to consider here, rather than the sort of specific or categorized gender traits, is the prime minister's lineage. Right. Because his biological father, the dictator of Cuba, Fidel Castro, and his adoptive father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, were both dyed-in-the-wool communists. One was able to enact more of that down in Cuba after the revolution down there that Castro successfully led. Pierre Elliott Trudeau was tempered in his communism as Prime Minister of Canada because he lived next to the U.S. and he wasn't able to go full bore with it. But our current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, Castro, is let's just say his operating philosophy seems to be a toxic admixture of both his biological and his adoptive father.
Yeah, for sure. And he definitely is, whether it's him that's, pulling the strings or if there's other people that are his advisors that are actually influence him and such. But he's using the old Machiavellian and the very divisive tactics of playing identity politics, which is, the old divide and conquer. It's the reason, it's very applicable, not just in modern times, but historically as well, because it works quite well. And we're seeing today, if people would just, put aside their petty differences instead of, place themselves in these silos or these echo chambers and just acknowledge the fact that, when tyranny's at the front door, regardless of your politics or which way you lean in terms of how you want society run, the best thing that you can do is stand against these tyrannical instincts that people like Trudeau have. And that, to me, that's a major concern that I'm seeing is people are playing this game, like say, so now it's, men, they're trying to pit men versus women. They're trying to pit straight versus, the LGBTQ, black people and brown people. Well, that's the other thing too. Now they're not even, they're actually creating these weird groups that they're trying to formulate. So now it's not just black people, it's BIPOC. So, whether you're black, indigenous, whereas as a libertarian myself, the best way to counter that stuff, and it actually helped me when I was growing up. I went from rural New Brunswick and lived half of my life in major city like Toronto, the east end of Toronto. And the one thing that I recognized early on, before I even knew what a libertarian was, but of course I understood the whole thing, the message of Martin Luther King and other independent minded or individual minded type of people, is deal with people based on the content of their character. And I didn't have to necessarily hear that, but to me it was, I'll deal with you as an individual. There might be stereotypes, and some of these stereotypes might be applicable, but to me, in the individual, in the world that I live in, I'm going to deal with each individual, right? So there's going to be, no matter who you're talking about. And when people try to play the race card, I point out to them, of course, they get pissed off at me for pointing it out, but I'll just say, listen, I get it. And there are foreign threats and boogeymans, and you can definitely change a culture if you import people from different countries that don't think along the same lines, or at least have the same kind of baseline.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's about shared cultural heritage and shared ideology. Right. The color of someone's skin or their genetics are pretty much irrelevant. It's how they act and carry themselves. And the problem is some places have objectively better ideas and cultures going on than others, but mind you, I don't think we have much place to say that in the West anymore, because clearly we're devouring ourselves from within with stupid ideas that came from here. So all of this stuff is in question and in flux right now. Like I say, as for Canada's just got so many problems right now. It's almost impossible to figure out where to start trying to fix them. And, and I'll reference Jordan Peterson again. In the way I look at things, I try, it can almost be too much. Like especially if you're a news junkie or someone that's online as much as we are, it's just a cascading river of problems all the time and just bad vibes and bad news. And some of that's true, some of that's pumped up by algorithms, whatever. But like if you are concerned about these things, you can only sort of tackle one problem at a time, right? The whole like it's an extension of the clean your room thing. What's the thing you can do? What's a problem you have a legitimate shot at helping to fix? Concentrate on that, and then let other people concentrate on the other ones. And so that's sort of what I do. I basically only write on two subjects. I write about the trucking industry because I've been in it my whole life and I've studied it fairly extensively, and I've referenced a lot of work by academics who've done the same thing. And then I try and advocate for people in Canada who are being crushed by the silly regime we live under, because the media is not doing it, so there's an opening. And those are the two things I can fix, And I think people should, keep a clear eye and vision about what's going on out there and all of the things, but then try and like fix one thing you can fix.
Yeah. Well, I think, and you kind of allude to that, but I think that's the biggest thing in terms of Canada. I mean, you can rely on, and when we hear about these things in terms of the Canadian culture, a lot of times we're thinking that in a past context, or at least the stories that we were told. And these ideals, they sound great, right? And they're awesome in terms of the things that are actually true. But once again, you can't rely on just with like healthcare system. Maybe early on in the healthcare system, before it went full socialized healthcare, and you still had competent people that originally in the private practice that were still functioning. That yes, you'll have the remnants of proper work ethic and all that stuff, but eventually that degrades, right? And that's the same thing with our culture today, right? You're having, whether it's adopting different people from this, especially the multiculturalism, which is, once again, it's basically pitting groups against groups rather than that unifying idea, right? Which is something that's more predisposed to American culture, right? Get rallying around the ideal rather than how we've been siloed and placed into these multicultural, which when you're talking about multicultural, it sounds good in theory, as with most things, but well, how can you have that, right? You have to at least have the thing that makes a culture cohesive is there has to be some principle or some overarching narrative that everyone agrees on, not that we can have or use the power of the vote to make our culture more dominant than the other. And that's what we're seeing today is, people are trying to pit cultures against each other. And like you were mentioning, that's a recipe for disaster. And that's why, once again, I will point out, even when people say in terms of, yes, of course, you need to worry about some foreign threats. You need to worry about these illegal asylum seekers that are pouring across the border. You do even have to worry about some of this mass immigration and the effect that it's going to have on the political landscape. But once again, if you look at the kind of people who are currently implementing the most tyrannical policies in modern times, it's people that look an awful lot like you and I, Gord. And that's the part where I try to get people out of that collective mindset and that in-group kind of mentality. And once again, I'm not rejecting in-group preference entirely. Like I'm a family man. That's kind of even, I've always been. I love my family, but it doesn't mean that I give blanket, amnesty for every member of my family to do whatever the hell they want, right? Matter of fact, the reason why I think I have a really good family, and I'm biased, of course, because it's my family, but I believe the reason why that is because I hold myself and them to a particular bar or standard. And those who don't meet it, we're not going to be on the same kind of level in terms of how well we get along. And if we did that in society in general, I think we'd be in a much better place.
Sure. Yeah. And, there's nothing wrong with having, a little bit of in-group preference. That's how we all get along. And, a family is an in-group, a community is a little bit of a larger one. And, there's the whole concept of subsidiarity where you deal with problems and delegate authority to the localest, smallest grouping possible. And, obviously nation states are sort of the opposite end of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as like, Canada goes and what's happening here, most of the bad actors and bad vibes and most of my enemies are all homegrown. They're from here.
Yeah.
And I can only, there's again, getting back to what I said, like, what can I do? I'm not going to get Justin Trudeau out of office. I am not going to fight the deep state, the entrenched bureaucracy in Ottawa and the provincial capitals by myself. I'm just one guy.
Right.
So what can I do? Well, I have this position with Newsweek. What can I do to help? Well, nobody's talking about those guys in Coots, so I started talking about. I mean, there's a few people online, of course, and there's other writers, and there's a group of us doing it. But in general, the mainstream media has abandoned these guys and has abandoned asking the deep questions that stem from this case and what's going on with it. Right? Like, they got picked up, accused of conspiracy to murder police officers, gun charges, mischief, all this stuff. And then, a couple of weeks ago, all of those charges got dropped against two of them. I'm going to say some things now that I'm taking responsibility for because I'm in the United States and it's not illegal. But, there's things going on in those pretrial hearings that would make your hair stand on end. Like the RCMP and the Crown conspiring to, create false ITO documents to obtain warrants. Like they're literally doing, I think the term they used was subversion. The government, the RCMP and the Crown were literally lying to the judges to get the warrants to search the Coots camp. And on the stand, the RCMP officers in question gave contradictory testimony. The Crown is now seeking, so there's another trial going on with other people at Coots, right? Where like Marco van Huygenbos and some of his associates who were kind of like organizing the Coots protest, they have their own trial separate from the four guys. And in that trial, the judges now imposed a publication ban with like there's no reason for it. And he's got no precedence. He just did it, right? Yeah. Because I think some of the dirty business the RCMP and Crown got up to applies to both cases.
Yeah.
And now the Crown is trying to, many people in libertarian circles will be aware of a concept called jury nullification, where, especially in the United States, where if you as a juror honestly in your heart believe that the Crown, or in the case in the US, whatever authorities down here, is not making their case and are like malicious bad actors, and you believe in your heart that that's what's going on here, or the charges are BS, you can just nullify it. As a juror, you have the right to say, nope, not guilty, right? And the Crown is now attempting in pretrial hearings to have that information blocked from being told to any potential jury that would meet for the two remaining guys, Tony Olenek and Chris Carbert. They're literally trying to sink any possibility that the jury would have all the tools necessary to just say this trial is bogus, right?
Yeah.
So they're literally trying to interfere. They're trying to like poison the jury pool even more and interfere in justice coming out of this case. And because they know they don't have one, right?
Well, that's it, right?
Right. And so, and a bunch of questions arise from this, like over and above the fact, right? So like these guys all got arrested. They were accused of the most heinous crimes. And then all of a sudden, 2 years later, after having been denied bail, separated from their families, their lives turned upside down, accused of all these vile things, made enemies of the state and the media, now the government's just like, oh, we didn't mean that. We're dropping the charges now, and we're going to get you guys to plea on something else. So if the government can just do that to you without any accountability or without anyone saying, hey, what's going on here? What right do you have to protest? What right do you have to free speech? If anyone can show up at a protest and say, hey, I disagree with the government about this, RCMP, OPP, whoever can pick you up off the street, throw you in jail, hold you for 2 years on bogus accusations, like what right do you have to even say anything? Like, how do you feel safe walking down the street? Like, these are major, major questions downstream of what happened to these guys in Coots. And the media in Canada, total code of silence, right?
Yeah.
Other than a few people online and myself screaming from the rooftops down here in the United States, nobody's talking about this that should be.
Right. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Gord, because actually now my situation, and we were kind of talking a little bit like that about that before we even went live. But the problem today is there is no universality in terms of the ethics, which are what judges and the justice system are supposed to be built and based upon. I mean, it even says, if you read the piece of crap rag called our Bill of Rights, that, under the rule of God, right? The supremacy of the rule of law and God, and the whole point of God and the rule of law, based on our heritage, on those Christian values, is it has to be a universal ethic. It has to be applicable to all. And the problem with the police today, just like in my situation with my impaired driving charge and the fact that I was criminalized for doing something that there was no victim, which should automatically render anything not to be an actual crime. There can be punishments and be penalized for things that maybe aren't socially acceptable, for sure, but for something to be turned into a crime, just like with these guys at the Coots border, it's so arbitrary in nature now. It's basically like rule by decree. It's like we've gone back to the days of monarchs and kings, because the judges basically sit up there as like I say, the ones who get to interpret the rules or the laws however they see fit, and in particular, especially when they put a political lens on it, and where it looks like you may be a threat to the state. And to me, any pretense of freedom, no matter what country you live in or reside, is the whole emphasis of what it is to be a free human being, is that you are not to be ruled over. And once again, laws have to be justified and applicable to everyone in a universal context. Whereas the RCMP today, I mean, look what they did, not just the RCMP, but look at the police, like I say, in Ottawa. Look what they did to the Coots. Look what they did to me. They just do what they're told by their superiors, rather than, and this is something that once after the Nuremberg trial, there should have been no excuse. As a matter of fact, this should be part and parcel. Instead of worrying about what they do with their junk in terms of kids, how about you start teaching, actual proper justice in schools, to understand what people are even mean to be and to have inherent and inalienable rights. That's the problem in Canada. Now in the US, there's a sizable portion of the population down there who fundamentally understand, because of the history, because of the culture of going against King George, right? Of being genuine, like anarchists, and not want to be ruled over. They understand that to the core. Whereas in Canada, we have redundancy in terms of our slave psychology. So we're not just enslaved to the democracy; we're still partially enslaved by the monarch, right? So it's kind of a psychological, and really, when you get down to it, it's a philosophical issue, that if these police or if even the citizens in society truly understood what fundamental rights, inherent and inalienable rights are, and if police had to go by what was deemed moral or ethical, and recognized themselves that these laws, and the reasons or excuses they used to arrest those 4 men at Coots and to hold them, because that was another thing fundamentally, at least when I was growing up, we kind of understood that you're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. So the fact that you could remand men for literally going on 2 years without actually them having their day in court, well, even if subsequent to that is, and same with me when they took my license immediately after being charged, rather than wait until I go through the court process because of this 3-month loophole they have. Well, it's like, well, then you're basically there is no precedent, there is no court proceedings that said whether I'm guilty or innocent. And if it turns out that I am innocent subsequent to going through the court procedure, or these gentlemen going through the court procedure, which they very may well have, but they go and play these plea bargains so they can try to avoid that, so they don't get the precedent, right? But by doing that, then you can't get these guys, even if they were proven innocent, right? Even if they had a chose rather than taking the deal, which, and I can understand why they would at this point in time, that's done for that purpose, to make their life so miserable. They're just like, just give me some way to get out from under this mess. But if they had their day in court, well, could they have gotten those 700 and whatever days back? No, you wouldn't. That would have been something that would have taken place in spite of the fact that they weren't proven guilty beyond, and that's nothing, beyond a reasonable doubt used to be a very high bar or threshold. Whereas now I consider the court system, the whole legal system, the justice system in this country is like, it's just it's lawyers playing let's make a deal. That's basically what it is, right? And once again, and the way it's set up, and I even had a lawyer when I was looking for lawyers for my impaired charge, which is very difficult to try to get one that wants to even defend you on these things. But anyways, he even said, and he was a high profile lawyer, he was a former prosecutor. And I was actually surprised that he told me this, but I suppose he'd have plausible deniability if I ever said try to hold him to it. But basically, he said they call it the shotgun approach. So in other words, they charge you rather than charging you with, a single charge, let's say, right? That might even be somewhat applicable for this situation. No, they'll charge you with multiple things so that they can play that wheeling and dealing, right? So, oh yeah, we'll drop this charge or this charge, but you have to plead guilty. So that's a way to constantly keep a high conviction rate, right? For the court. So it looks like, I guess, they're doing something in terms of justice, but in reality, as it actually works out, as with so many things when it comes to government, it does the exact opposite. You're not getting justice. You're once again just more oppression. And the sad part is, like I say, it's not just the police, but the general public. They'll listen to rhetoric espoused by their thought leaders, whether they're in the media or these politicians, and not even question the kind of things like you. I have compassion for those four gentlemen. I haven't spent nearly as much as time as you talk about them, because I talk about a lot of different things, right? But I can feel for them, because not just because I'm an empathetic person to begin with, but because, like I say, I've gone through a similar situation, maybe not as harsh as these gentlemen for sure, but I completely understand and can empathize at how frustrating and how hard it is, especially, these guys too, they had families, right? So not only are they themselves suffering, but in retrospect, their children, their wives, their family members, maybe their employer who maybe had a hard or difficult time trying to replace someone like that. There's a lot of suffering that takes place needlessly for once again, for no real reason. Once again,
Well,
the bar.
there is a reason. There is a reason, Bennett, and that's
Well,
to
yeah.
make
Well, okay, yeah.
to be made an example of and to punish them.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So out there in the zeitgeist, there's, especially in regime media like the CBC or, various commentators online, they like to say that, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives are importing Trumpism to Canada and, all this populist rage and rage farmers and all the rest of that garbage. What's actually being imported to Canada by the government is the use of this concept called lawfare, where the government or corporations who have they don't have a case against someone, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a legitimate way to either charge you with something or attack you or get you out of their way. They use the legal system, so they'll charge you with spurious charges, or they'll keep. They'll make up fake stuff, as we see with Coots, and it's looking more and more like there's definitely a conspiracy to have used those guys to legitimate the invocation of the Emergencies Act, and it's going to take an inquest to see how far up the food chain it goes. I think it goes right to Ottawa. I think it goes to the PMO. But we're seeing now, over and above the Coots guys, a whole lot of people involved with the Freedom Convoy who are still in court fighting bogus charges laid against them by the Crown, or being, issued tickets by the police because they just happened to be in the streets in Ottawa after the Emergencies Act came down. Right. And a number of those people, I'm working on getting a couple of guests for my own show here, who were charged with either mischief or failing to obey a police order, whatever associated with just protesting in Ottawa. They went to court. They had the charges against them acquitted, or they had their day in court. They defeated the government, and now the Crown is appealing acquittals. They're taking people who've already gone to court, already beat the charges against them stemming from Freedom Convoy, and the Crown's dragging them back into court. I tell this to Americans, and they can't believe it, because down here in the U.S. they have a concept called double jeopardy, where if the government takes you to court over something and you beat the charges, that's it. They can't bring you back for the same charges. Well, apparently in Canada that doesn't apply, and now they're just bringing these people back. What is the point of wasting taxpayer funds to relitigate minor charges that the cops laid, like nuisance charges, just to punish protesters? It's to punish them again. The whole thing against the Coots guys was punishment. Chris Barber and Tamara Leach, all of these people, It's punishment by the regime using lawfare, which is something we've seen happen with Donald Trump and a number of figures in the United States. And that's the real import to Canada from the U.S. is this practice of lawfare.
And it's to exhaust them of their resources. Now, Trump has a lot more resources at his disposal than someone like Tamara Lynch or Chris Babber or other of these Coots gentlemen. But like you say, and that's a major factor, and I'm sure was a contributing factor into why, if any of these gentlemen end up taking plea deals, because even if you try to appeal, like I even tried that myself, and once again, like you realize that, well, do I spend my kids inheritance basically trying to fight against the system that more than likely is not going to prove to benefit me in any way in the long run, and just tie myself up and my resources for a longer period of time? Or do you just what most Canadians do, and you just accept this kind of entrapment and enslavement that just leaves us constantly like the dog chasing his proverbial tail. And I think it's terrible. And like you say, even the charges they get used against Tamara Lynch and such, I mean, mischief. I mean, first of all, that is such a loose term. And once again, but it's a perfect example how these laws might have had some good intention, when they were first drafted, and I'll even, give them, the benefit of the doubt that they were. But once again, when you get to the point where now the lawyer, the legalese, right, the legal class can basically interpret them in conjunction with the judges, can interpret them to mean whatever the hell they want. So once again, you are genuinely living under like a rule by edict rather than rule based on actual like proper common law or genuine anything that would remotely resemble fundamental justice. And that's like you're pointing out, is basically that's what they're doing them. It's not just to send that message, right? That don't you dare stand up against this, which it does. It sends a lot of Canadians who might have been otherwise willing to stand up and oppose this stuff. They're like, well, I see what they have, what the hell they went through. I sure as shit don't want to go through that either. But once again, unless you're massively independent, wealthy, you are going to be expending a lot of your resources, which, if you think about it, the tens of thousands of dollars, how many years or how many months or maybe years are you going to have to work to pay for that, right? So you're basically being economically enslaved for that particular time frame, just for the bare necessity of trying to defend yourself against a very corrupt and overly cumbersome system. And I like I say, I feel terrible about that situation, not just for them, but anyone else is caught in this trap. Now, I did want to just ask you one more question there, Gord, because based on a lot of the people, and I think even maybe Tucker Carlson might be himself, but there's a lot of what I've noticed myself, and this is just a little bit something that I've talked about in past videos. And actually, if anyone else, when we're talking about how corrupt the system is to the core, and in terms of the enforcers of the state and the police and how they're kind of carrying out the orders and the edicts of some of these the ruling class, is all you have to do is look through my past live streams and videos, because I've covered a lot of those issues as it pertains. Just type in RCMP or the police or any of those keywords or tags, and you'll see I've covered. There's so many things that I've reported on that have been reported in the past where the degradation in terms of even the level of competence or requirements that are needed just to even become a police officer in this country is just, it would shock your sensibilities. But anyways, what I was kind of going to ask is, I've noticed, and I kind of point this out, and I've pointed this out in my own live streams and past videos, and I'm a Gen Xer myself. I have kind of noticed, and I think it might have something to do with the fact of the time frame that we were born and raised, and a lot of us being latchkey kids. But I would believe, and I think I'm correct, that you're a Gen Xer as well, aren't you?
I'm on the cusp. I was born in 1979.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you're a Gen Xer. Yeah. Because it would be from 1965. Some people put the cutoff at 80. Some people go for the 20-year duration. So it'd be more along like 84, 85. But yeah, you would be definitely on the cusp. And like I say, that's what I have noticed. And once again, hashtag not all, right? I'm just saying, but yeah, but it does seem to be something where a lot of this thing is demographics and age demographics in particular seem to be playing a big pivotal role. A lot of the people who do represent the current establishment, now obviously Justin Trudeau is the exception and outlier there because sadly he's a Gen Xer too. But you have a lot of these people who do want to maintain the status quo and the establishment and have benefited themselves tremendously for decades by using this system, to benefit themselves at the other people's expense. But I have noticed that most people that I see, whether it's on the internet or, in any public venues, that are standing up for the most part, and once again, not all, but you do see a large cohort, or at least I would say the plurality of those people who do particularly come from the Gen X cohort. And I think a lot of that has to do with the culture that we were raised in particular, whether you're talking about the 70s or the 80s or even the earlier 90s. And even as it pertains to some of these LGBTQ issues, right? We grew up in a time, and I'm sure you would agree with this as well, as this kind of shit wasn't jammed in your face. It wasn't created as a wedge issue or divisive. It was part of the culture, like whether it was some people that were in the music industry or televisions or movies that were people that were, part of the LGBT. But once again, it was never created where, or the scenario was never painted for us where it's us versus them. So I think we all kind of grew up in that, whether you agreed with the lifestyle or not. Most of us are like, whatever, as long as you're not fucking with me or doing anything against me, then, whatever the hell you do in your bedroom, that's kind of your business thing.
Yeah, the sort of the peak of live and let live is behind us. Yes, and it no longer applies because they don't want to let you live and let live. It's that deal is gone.
Yeah. Well, actually, let me ask you, because that's actually a really important part. And like I say, I try to tie in all the age demographics into this. And what I've noticed myself, now my experience is anecdotal, but I ask a lot of people that I interview and talk to if they have any kind of shared or similar experiences. So me, as one of the old, like an older Gen Xer, I was born in 1970. But I had my kids in the normal timeline that historically most people did. So me and my wife were in our teens, right? I was in my late teens. She was more in her mid to later teens kind of deal. So I was 19, and because I had my kids at that time frame, they grew up, and it was kind of a strange thing for me because I think this is probably one of the few times that not just me or those of us experienced, but I think even historically, where you had me as a Gen Xer raising what are now 29 and 33, my oldest son. Well, he'll be 33 in July, so not quite there yet. But they are millennials, but there was such a discrepancy even in them when they were going to school, is you could see the difference, and it was quite pointed out quite readily by other people, is the millennials who were raised by Gen Xers, who were much, much less rigid in the way we brought them up because we were younger ourselves. So we didn't feel like we knew everything. We were much more flexible, right? And much more not passive in any way, right? Still trying to teach them right from wrong and all that stuff, but not so rigid. Now, that was quite the contrast comparison to people who, like from my parents' generation, the boomers, who maybe went into the professional fields and started having their kids in their late 30s or early 40s. Well, they ended up with millennials children that went to school with my millennial age kids, and you could see the stark difference in the kind of, once again, like you were pointing out, that live let live mentality. My kids seen that, and I raised my kids to go ripping around on dirt bikes. There was no protecting them from, I actually, because I remember how good the greatest things when I was growing up was the fact that I was a latchkey kid, and the parents basically didn't want nothing to do with you till it was nighttime, right? Till the street lights come on. Although in rural area where I come from, there wasn't any street lights, but you had that genuine freedom. And actually it was one of the greatest things because it's like street smarts. So there's intellectual smarts, but then there's the street smarts that you learn in terms of how you socialize with people when there's no authority, when there's no parents around to tell you, how to deal with people. You learn that on the fly. Like I say, that's real world street smarts, and you see how that applies in the real world. Whereas the kids, like I say, the millennial age kids that were friends of my kids who were raised by baby boomers, everything was so top down structured for them. They didn't have that kind of flexibility or ability to think on the fly, right? It's like they always had to refer to an authority of some sort to gain what they understand, any knowledge. And I think that is my biggest fear, is how many of us Gen Xers, like I say, there's a bunch of us that have kids. Now yours though are quite younger in comparison to mine, but they seem to be, and that's kind of where I'm worried with this, because millennials are now represent, now that boomers are moving out of influence and dying off. The millennial cohort is now, going to have the largest amount of voting power, and they're now, even in terms of numbers, has been reported on. I think National Post just recently reported on, and a few of the other medias, is now they are the ones that have the larger numbers, and not just because of our own demographics in terms of Canadian citizens that are already here, right, old stock, but because of the influx now of these immigrants who represent in that kind of age range as well. So what was it last year? I think a 7% increase in 1 year in terms of, now you have all these millennial age kids. But now, how is that going to affect the rest of us in society? Now, when you have, like I say, the boomers might be moving on in their years and maybe not going to be able to control things for much longer. But my biggest fear is, are we going to go as a Gen X, or am I going to go my whole life from being basically oppressed by my parents' generation to now, right, that torch getting passed on to people of my kids' generation, basically trying to replicate that kind of, everything's all about safety and security, and to hell with freedom?
Yeah. I think what you're getting at here is that the sort of self-organizing, self-regulating, as you said, go outside and play, and you sort of had to learn to work problems out amongst yourselves.
Right.
And the younger generations, there's more of a deference to authority. We better go get mom or dad or the teacher or the daycare person. And there's less, sort of self-governance, self-regulation, spontaneously organizing and working things out for yourself. Part of that too, I think, is, a lot of kids stay inside.
Still there, Gord? Hello? I seem to have lost Gord there for a second. Might be just a bad connection there. In the meantime, till Gord comes back there, maybe I'll just check on a couple of the comments there. Yesterday I just left trucking. Oh, really? Oh, thanks for joining the stream, by the way, Matt Dugas. And I wonder, why did you leave trucking? I'm just curious. Is that because of all the crazy rules that they have now for truck drivers? Let's see. Appreciated, humbled. Well, thank you, Matt Dugas. Just check on the next comment down here. During the Emergency Act Commission, the mayor of Coots admitted that the photo ops of the weapons stashes were faked by the RCMP and an excuse to break up the blockade. Those photos were used to imprison the four. Well, thanks for pointing some of that stuff out there, Thick Beaver. Like I say, I'm not as knowledgeable on that particular file, that particular story, as some other people are, but thanks for any information that you do bring to light here. Hey, David and everyone. Hey, David, thank you for joining the stream. Always nice to see you in the stream as well. Government has gone rogue. Yeah, you're right about that. Okay, Gord's back here. Let me just bring him back on. You must have had a bad connection there, did you, Gord?
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay, man. No worries.
Yeah, so we have this sort of, this change with the younger generation where they're not playing amongst themselves as much as they used to. There's no longer the culture of get outside and figure out your own play.
Right.
And, hanging around less with other children and more with technology and more supervision. I think that's clearly leading to a society where people are much more primed to be led, to be supervised, surveilled, told what to do.
Yeah.
And then, guys like you and me are not having that. I don't want anyone telling me what to do.
Exactly.
I'm a self-governing guy. I've never been in trouble with the law. I don't need anyone getting in my face.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's being lost due to all these sort of changes we're seeing in society.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And I'm not sure if you're familiar. Actually, I've been, because once again, these are like I say, even when you're talking about generalized statements or even stereotypes, the reason why generalized statements seem applicable is because a lot of times they are, once again, but that's the beautiful thing about dealing with things on the individual basis, is you can always point out the outliers and the exceptions. But there is a book that I've got here in the background here. It's called The Fourth Turning. can't remember off the top of my head the author. I believe it was actually 2 authors, but it seems like, and if you go if you're a student of history and you go all the way back, whether you're talking about the Roman Empire, which is something that a lot of people like to talk about, but I mean, it would be just as applicable in the more modern British Empire. But there does seem to be a thing where, and the fourth turn is basically 4 different generations. And you've probably even heard that old expression, right? Like, bring about hard times, this generation. And then I forget I'll butcher that quote anyways, but eventually you do get to that point. Now, if things are playing out the way that typically is, it seems like, is it Gen Zers, or is it back to, Gen Alpha that's going to be the shift? Because I think the biggest problem for us, especially when you're talking about politics, and the sad part about today is people unfortunately get this concept that how you change society, whether it's for the good or the bad, is through the political process, which to me, that's actually the exact opposite. It's your culture, right? Politics, and Andrew Breitbart basically coined this phrase, was, politics is downstream of culture. But I'm particularly worried as a Gen Xer, because if you look at the way the baby boomer bulge happened, like our parents' generation would have been typically, 6 people, right, in terms of like siblings, whereas at my generation, mine and your generations, there's less than 2. Like, what was it, 1.9? So basically, on average, there'd be two siblings in a particular household. So my problem is, as Gen Xers, we seem to be in that position in our life, like we're old enough that we kind of understand things fairly well. We have our personal anecdotal experiences and experiences growing up in terms of having that live, let live mentality. And I think we would be great in terms of, being the referees for any situation. But the biggest fear I see, and I'm starting to see, though, it is nice to see some Gen Xers with, the power, not just the power of the purse, but like Elon Musk would be another example, but the power of the big megaphone, so they can get their voices out there. But because in the political realm, right, so whether it's the boomers or the millennials beneath us, we're massively outnumbered in terms of what we represent on a population scale. And in Canada in particular, it's even more difficult in terms of like majority or mob rule in our particular democracy, because we run under the first past the post system, where you could have, it's literally not even a genuine majority, but there's so many people that are beholden. So a lot of baby boomers in particular who are beholden on maintaining the system, even if they recognize the massive fallibilities and how corrupt it's become, but their livelihood, their latter years, their latter stage in their life relies on maintaining this. So you can kind of see even their own rational self-interest in why they want to maintain it, even if they recognize it could be detrimental. And what I'm seeing,
you see this. Sorry to interrupt. You see this with you see this with the housing price problem in Canada, right?
Mm-hmm.
So real estate is just astronomical, and it's extremely difficult for younger people to get into homes. Part of that's like, the sort of the extremely high immigration numbers that are unsustainable and materially untenable.
Yeah.
And another reason why no one's doing anything about the housing costs is it's part of that, as you put it, the status quo. So many boomers, so many people who are riding high on their home value being what it is, and using that to leverage their lifestyle and be able to like borrow money against their house to pay for this, their kids' education. It's not all bad stuff. And it's not all just consumerism, but so much of the economy now rides on home valuation. And so many people have leveraged their lifestyles on their home valuation that there's no incentive to do anything to correct the housing prices. Right. And this is like a real world example of that, the maintenance of the status quo is going to harm a lot of people, but fixing the status quo is also going to harm a lot of people. So what do we do? It's just one of these crazy intractable problems.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, and so the boomers in particular, like you say, and even if you break that down into the subsequent generations below them. So once again, Gen Xers, we were fortunate enough that a lot of us, or at least the ones that were, typical in the way we lived our life in their 20s and 30s. A lot of us are either if we wanted to own a home at this point in time, we've pretty much, we own our home, or at least to some degree, we own something. Whereas the millennials are the ones that are really, really striving in particular to get into the home market. And then where I see another great divide, and not just anecdotally in my own community and my own personal experiences, is, so yes, if you had if you're a millennial who has an older boomer parent that maybe can help you, right? Because they're using that capital, right? That equity that's built up in that $1 million home that they bought for $60,000 in the 70s, right? Then they have the capacity. And once again, a lot of these people in particular that can afford these things are people that are in the public sector, let's say. Whereas the private sector people in particular, who are basically just, straddling just to keep their head above water, because inflation just is, a lot of the private sector wages haven't been keeping on par with the inflation rate. So you're kind of getting lower and lower and lower every year. And actually, I remember Globe and Mail did a whole article years ago in terms of, for Gen Xers in particular, there's been wage stagnation for basically our entire life. So even though we started out, when I was younger at $4 an hour, you could be making 5 times that now, but you're no further ahead because of that. But what you're seeing in terms of the divide is, yes, the millennials who have the ability to get help from their now house wealthy, or at least can borrow against that equity, are the ones that are, going to maybe get into that, even though that's the other thing, it's not even really a help for them. So just because you can buy what's speculatively $1 million house, and your boomer parents can get you into that, you're still, once again, you're putting yourself up for a lot of disposable income for the rest of your life to even try to maintain that structure, to keep that roof over your head. But what about the people that are, like you say, that function in the private sector, who don't have independently wealthy parents? And these are people who are genuinely desperate and suffering, and they're being told, because of this overarching narrative in terms of some of the older generations, these lazy millennials. There's a lot of millennials, and like I said, I know them personally, that work really hard and try their best, but it's just, no matter what they do, they're stuck in this quagmire. And I can't help but think, is when they look out there. So I try to put myself in the minds of anyone. I think that's a good way to perceive the world. And I think of them, and once again, I've seen this even in the real world experience. If you see the people, the cohorts in your community that share your same age range, the only ones that seem to be getting by are ones that, like I said, either are benefiting from their public sector parents that have, once again, have that disposable income because of the way the system is set up, or you have to become part of the government so that you can get access to these higher pays. Because that's the other thing, the public sector now, right? It used to be the pretense that you went into the public sector because you were you wanted to be a public servant. So your income might have been lower than the private sector, but you wanted to do this out of some sense of doing things for your community or benevolence. Whereas now, a lot of people, the sole reason why they go into the public sector is because, well, I can get paid a whole lot more. I can retire at 55, get my gold-plated pension and all this stuff, right? So now I think the entire incentive structure are basically trying to entice the millennials, or even maybe the Gen Zers coming up underneath them, is, yeah, if you want to get by in this world, you basically got to join the state, which, once again, that is a modern form of socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it. But the incentive structure is literally to keep growing the state. I think it was last year, it was during COVID, 90% of the jobs that were increased in this country was in the public sector. At some point in time, it's that old cart, like how many people are pulling the cart and how many people are sitting on the cart, right? I mean, at some point in time, the straw is going to break the camel's back, right?
The cart clearly needs to get pulled into the scales and ticketed for being overloaded.
Yeah, good analogy, Gord. Good one.
Yeah. Well, like you say, the public sector, the expansion of the public sector is it's a death spiral. As long as it keeps growing and taking away from what people do in, the vestigial remains of the free market or the private sector, sooner or later the parasite's going to overtake the host, and then that's it. The party's over. So we all need to keep that in mind.
Yeah. So would you agree with me then? Because I definitely agree with your assessment there. So would you agree with me too? And I would imagine probably so, but I want to hear in your words, is And it's something I've been teaching my boys, and a lot of people, they talk to their own friends. So it's branching out just by a few degrees of separation, how many people can learn this thing. And I think it's important. And there are others too, like even people like Jordan Peterson and stuff, is to me is when you think about it, because I also remember like hearing a lot of things that people from my grandparents, the greatest and silent generation, used to tell me is even during the Great Depression, which, things might be all rosy now, but like I say, all the times in history when things were going great, well, you don't know when things are going to go bad till it's right in your face. And we expect that that's probably going to happen. So what I tell my people, just like my grandparents used to say, is during the Great Depression, so my grandparents that were in rural New Brunswick for the most part, yeah, the Great Depression was really rough on a lot of people, but the most people that suffered tremendously under the Great Depression were people who lived in the big cities and didn't have any convertible skills other than going to work for the man or the corporation, right? They weren't convertible into being self-sustaining or at least at the community base, whereas people in rural Canada, people in rural New Brunswick, like where my grandparents grew up, because they were farmers, and they grew their own, not just vegetables, but they also, had their own animals, chickens, cows, pigs, and all that stuff. Is they're the amount that they suffered under the Great Depression was quite diminished in comparison, because then, like, yeah, I guess there's a Great Depression, but I'm living the same way today, right, that I was 10 years ago before the Great Depression even happened. So I think, once again, what we as people that are, a little bit older, right, as Gen Xers ourselves, that what we should be helping to expand upon and teaching young people, and of course leading by example, is yes, have some translatable skills that you can put to use in the real world. For that, to me, it's hedging, right? Who knows, right? Who knows what it's going to bring? But I think it's even fulfilling. Like, you're probably the same way. I actually feel fulfilled. I have a meaningful life because I produce and provide in society things that are actually required by everyone. And I think if the younger people have those kind of skills at their disposal, then they're going to protect themselves much more so than, like, I have nothing against Bitcoin. I have nothing against, matter of fact, gold and silver are great ways to hedge against inflation. But I think the greatest attributes are to have actual tangible skills that you can put to real use in the real world.
Yeah, make yourself useful and beneficial to your community and your fellow man. You mentioned there the meaning involved with that. As the public sector grows and as we face automation, another thing I discuss on my Substack is, the looming threat of autonomous trucks and other automated technology, is the public sector and the government and these sort of, like, tech pimps. They keep bringing up UBI, like, we'll just give everybody a universal basic income. Everyone's going to be a ward of the state to a certain minimum standard. And it's like, man, mess with people's meaning at caution. People need meaning. And when enough people have had meaning taken away from them, especially the meaning that they derive from serving their fellow man.
100%. You cut out a bit there on me there again, Gord. But yeah, I definitely agree with you on the meaning there. I'm just going to wait, actually, because this is kind of important. So I'll just wait and see if Gord gets back here before replying further. Yeah, sorry about that, folks. I'm sure it's just a connection issue there. It's just one of the things that happens and takes place. You know what I mean? Sometimes you get a bad connection and, things don't happen as smoothly as we would like to. But anyways, like I say, in the meantime, while we're waiting for Gord to get back here, I'll just go through a few more of the comments. Okay. So I see Jim McCall is in the stream. Gen X had one kid due to the government making life too expensive. Yes, I know exactly what you mean there, Jim McCall. And trust me, there's a substantial or sizable portion of the Canadian population who they themselves are in that same situation. And sadly, like, even the next generations, it's getting even worse. So to the point where a lot of them, millennials in particular, aren't even having kids, which, that's the other thing, is how the hell do the governments, which is why the debts and deficits continue to grow, is, you wouldn't even if you had taxed, the younger generations at 100%, there's probably still not enough in terms of numbers to even pay for all these unfunded liabilities and entitlements, which is another area where they're trying to fill that gap, that void, with mass immigration. But once again, that's not a proper answer to do it, because now you're making the people, the old stock Canadians, as they like to call them, suffer even more so. And you're turning a lot of younger Canadians who maybe didn't have animosity towards immigrants or some of these asylum seekers. But when you see that government is once again picking winners or losers in society, and once again subsidizing a lot of these newcomers to a huge sizable degree in comparison and contrast to some of these younger, older stock Canadians, that automatically is going to create a lot of animosity and a lot of division where there should not be. And I think that's going to be something that's going to play out for the foreseeable future. And like I say, how bad can things get? I don't know. I mean, the kind of governments that we have in the Western world that are in charge of things these days, I don't even think they're Machiavellian, right? At least if they were somewhat Machiavellian in nature, you would think, okay, they have some grand plan. But I think these people are just literally flying by the seat of their pants, very entitled in their mindset, and highly incompetent. I genuinely, seriously believe that. Once again, it'd be easy to believe that it's Machiavellian in nature, or maybe some reverse psychology, and they're doing this kind of psychological manipulation because on the other side of it, they think they're this grand plan. Not saying there aren't those people who exist, but like I say, the ones ruling and running things these days don't seem to be even remotely on that level. They seem to be very incompetent and constantly being caught with their pants down, and have to what? Every time government, they create a government program that screws things up, that their answer, I mean, the pure definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And every time some government program fails, and there's like basically every one of them that you can think of that's been in place for any amount of time, always proved to be an abstract failure based on the incentive structure and how it's all funded and everything. But what's their answer? To create another, right? I mean, even with this online harms bill and the reintroduction of hate speech and thought crimes and all that stuff. But now they're creating another bureaucratic nightmare in terms of institutionalized authority that none of us voted for. So it's not just the CRTC. No, they're going to create their own Ministry of Truth that's going to regulate, online speech and content. So once again, and that incentive structure only leads to one place. Once again, that fast race to the lowest common denominator that's going to be detrimental for even those who advocate naively for it. Anyways, I'm going to read a couple more comments. Hopefully Gord will get a chance to jump back in with us here. That's true. The boomers are selling the houses to the banks. Yeah. And that's the other thing. That's the sad thing is they're trying to use these houses as their proverbial pension funds and their proverbial gold mines. But whatever happened to the idea, the notion of passing on that intergenerational wealth? That's how you help. That's the thing. You don't need government programs. And I explain these to my kids. I don't have a whole lot, but anything that I own, outright is going to be passed on to my kids, so that help to give them at least a leg up or some starting point in society where it's not necessarily rock bottom at the bottom, right? You see a lot of people who have the advantage out there today are the ones who have intergenerational wealth to depend on, right? That first stepping stone they need to get into, whether they want to be entrepreneurs, start their own business and stuff like that, or invest in themselves or in their community. You need capital in order to do so. And that capital is always based on, whether you're talking about property today or other ways, other areas, fine metals and stuff like that, other stores of value, right? Even rare things like art or collectible automobiles or things. But without these subsequent generations having that baseline to start from, of having some of that intergenerational wealth passed down to them, you literally are leaving them susceptible and wide open to being just the modern day serf, subject, and slaves to those who do, which will truly represent the new ruling class. And you will see that old world style divide where there's no middle class anymore. It's just the ultra wealthy and the abstract poor, those who live in abstract poverty. Now, I acknowledge that today's form of abstract poverty is maybe substantially different, right, than abstract poverty in the past, but you have to do it in terms of comparison in modern today, not comparison to back in the day. So yes, you as a poor person today have more at your disposal than a poor person 100 years ago. But if you take that, abstract that out and compare it to what the wealthy have, well, it's even much more so today for the wealthy in comparison and contrast to the poor. So actually the divide is continuing to get worse. But that's the thing. People look at their own situation. They're like, well, at least I can afford food in my belly and I don't have to be a farmer and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, you might think that's a benefit, but you wait and see how this pans out. Once again, as enough time goes by. Anyways, I'm not sure what happened to Gord. He may have, let me see, actually, let me open up my email and see if maybe he's tried to reply to me on the email side of things, just to see. Hopefully he gets a chance to come back on. Having issues with my net. Yes, sorry, but no problem. Okay, I'll just say no problem, Gord. Problem, Gord. I hope you figure it all out. Whoops. Okay. Yeah, I'm probably actually get talking so much here. I might end up actually forgetting what we were talking about there, actually. But anyways, like I said, I'm just going to read some more of the comments here. True. The boomers are selling houses to the bank. Yeah. In my mid 50s, there was no gender confusion, peanut allergies, safe bait, or any of that. We told ethnic jokes as kids that would get us front of a human rights struggle. Exactly. And you know what? A lot of those jokes, like, as you know, like, yes, we're all privy to that stuff, in particular, those in the Gen Xer category, right? But none of that was done with any like genuine malice, right? Even if these jokes, were stereotyping people based on, their race or their sex or maybe their religion or some of these things or their sexual preferences, most of that was done in kind and in a joking manner without any serious malice. And it's fine, right? As a matter of fact, as someone with Irish heritage and stuff, I mean, I get a kick out of it. I mean, I don't get offended if someone says an Irish joke, right? That's the kind of thing. Those jokes help create a little bit more. If you can bring humor to the table, it gives you a totally different perception of this. So you can have a little bit thicker skin things and not take things so damn seriously that it's going to cause you to get all offended, right? That's a big problem I see today. And thanks for pointing that out there, Dave, is everybody wants to be a victim and everybody's offended. And what a terrible, think about what that is to live in that kind of a mindset, to live in that kind of a space. I mean, that alone has got to be hell. I just like you, Dave, I'm very appreciative of the fact that, during the timeline that I was growing up, that, yeah, this stuff was, once again, gave us much thicker skin, gave us much more street smarts, much more general knowledge of the world, and I think allowed us to be able to adapt to whatever situation or circumstances we found in. We created it, or it created an era about us that, we realized, there was always going to be difficult times. And once again, based on even myself, some of the stories we heard from, like I say, our grandparents in terms of some hard times. So we weren't fearful of it. We always wanted better things, but if bad things came, well, we would just deal with them. And we figured that, what? Remember that old expression? If it don't kill you, it'll only make you stronger, right? It's a great thing when you come through something, some trial, tribulation, or difficult time in your life, and you come out the other side of that, and you realize that, it was rough, it was difficult, but look, in the grand scheme of things, I'm no worse for the wear. Matter of fact, I'm wiser now. I now have more knowledge, and I can apply that to the real world. And I think that's proven to be beneficial, like I say, in particular, for those of us in the Gen X cohort. Once again, though, I am very fearful of the fact that a lot of the younger people today aren't getting that kind of rigidity and understanding, or once again, as Gord even pointed out himself, that have that adopting that live, let live mentality without being, feeling compelled that you have to, claim victimhood or oppressive status somehow to make that something that makes you worthwhile or to give you any sense of meaning in your life. To me, I don't know how you can even think that how somehow having a victim mentality can benefit you, right? I mean, that pat on the shoulder or that kind of person that's going to be like, oh, you poor helpless victim, the devouring mother thing, that is not really a benefit when you're an adult. Maybe when you're a small child, right? Might be more applicable. But when you become an adult, whether you're male or female, no, you don't want to have to be overly nurtured or to be overly protected from things, because then once again you lose that resilience. And to be a human being, no matter if you're talking in today's context or in the context of past generations or past centuries or past millennial, we had to be resilient in order to evolve. That was literally important. And that's no different whether you're talking about in the state of nature or in modern democratic societies. You have to have some kind of resolve. You have to have the ability to adapt to your surroundings without feeling like you're going to be overcome or have to succumb to it, right? To the point where, look at how many people today have to use not just crutches and vices, but just pop those pills and think that that's escapism is the proper way. I mean, I get that it can benefit you, and especially in that quick fix of the moment, just like the drug dealer that puts the needle in his arm. Yeah, you get that quick fix for the moment, but expand out and look at that at the macro level. It is really self-destruction. And in the long run, going to be a lot more than just self-destructive in terms of your psychology and your mentality, right? And your confidence and your competence and your self-esteem, but it'll ultimately be your ultimate demise as well. But yeah, thanks for bringing that stuff up there, Dave. Entire generations are being socially engineered into something the ruling class wants. Yeah, weak, confused, and apathetic people who won't stand up to tyrannical government. And isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? That's just like, well, once again, that's just like, the parent that wants to rule constantly over their kids, right? They have to constantly instill fear in them for that to even be remotely effective. Because the minute the kid is no longer fearful of your authority, then that's the time that, they're going to step out and be more independent. And that is something that, like I said, not just the ruling establishment, but a very tyrannical kind of parent, that's the biggest thing they fear, is that their kid or society gains any independence or autonomy. Because yes, it's much, much more difficult to micromanage and control those who are more autonomous, independent, or sovereign in some way. And you're absolutely bang on with that assessment there, Dave. You're on a roll there today, my friend. And let me just check one more, see if Gord's maybe how Gord's making out there, because it might turn out that we might not get Gord back here. Let me just see how far we are along into the old live stream. We're an hour and 17, so we'll probably hang out here for another 15 minutes. And if Gord doesn't make it back, well, I think we had a pretty productive conversation, and I'll get a chance hopefully to get a chance to speak to Gord again. And I will actually mention, and I'll make sure to place those in the links of this live stream below, is Gord does his own blog. It's autonomous. Let me just get that pulled up here. This trucker. Okay. Let me see if I can find that. Oh, what's going on here? Oh, I see. I didn't spell that right. Maybe I put my glasses on. I might be able to see a little better here. No. Trucker. Let me see. Substack, I believe. Substack. Yeah, here we go. So I will just bring this up for you folks. Okay. Here, let me bring this onto the live stream here for you folks. Share screen. So yeah, because in the meantime, I might as well let you know where you can follow Gord. Because like I say, he not only is he had quite a nice presence in terms of getting interviewed by Tucker Carlson, which obviously has a large megaphone and a large audience. But once again, he contributes to Newsweek. He writes some great articles, and he's also on Substack. So this here, if you look, autonomous truck, and then in brackets ERS, that's his page. And look, new pieces at Compact and Newsweek. So here, if you click on this, you'll see he's got some new articles on Compact magazine. And once again, if you scroll down through it, you'll see he's done some Newsweek pieces. And Gord, like I say, and he's interviewed other truck drivers and talked to them as well. Anyways, let me just get another one out here. Let's see. Gord MaGill. Oh, maybe I should bring up as well. Where is it? Yeah, actually, I should bring up. Wait a sec here. So, drive autonomy, Substack. Oh, here we go. So, yeah, this is. Oh no! Apparently, that must have been one of his X accounts, formerly Twitter, that got deleted. And that's the sad thing, as you folks know, that this is what happens to a lot of people today that does challenge the status quo in any way, is you end up being on the wrong side of the ruling class, and they're constantly trying to suppress our voices entirely. Let's see here. Is this one still functioning? I do believe so. I do believe so. Yes, here we go. So I will bring this up because this here, and once again, you'll see the link to his Substack here as well. So let me bring that on. Let me stop this one here. Present, share screen. Okay, here we go. So I'll just bring this on as well. So once again, not only can you find his Substack here, but you can follow him over. Of course, you see that I'm already following Gord. And like I say, me and Gord have been friends for quite a while. Back in the day, this was quite early on. I'd say probably pushing on 10 years when I first met Gord MaGill. And that picture that you see in his profile there was one of the things I remember talking to him at the time. I believe that was when he was in the outback of Australia. And down there, you can have, basically be a road train. You can have not just two trailers on the back like the B trains or the A trains that you see on the big highways in Canada, or even going to the mills here in New Brunswick. But yeah, you could have, I believe the largest number I believe is, I think you can have upwards of 8 trailers on there. So yeah, Gord a truck driver. Oh, and there you can see that there's a picture with him with Tucker Carlson. But yeah, definitely if you get the chance, once again, follow Gord here. Because like I say, he's a good guy, a fellow Canadian. He's well traveled. He's very knowledgeable. He's a great writer. That's one area once again where I can write fairly well, but it's just, I don't know what it is with me. I'm just not a big fan of writing. I'm trying to do better. I've been even talking to my wife about that stuff. It's I get some compliments, especially over on ThinkSpot. By the way, if you folks haven't been over there on ThinkSpot, I've been doing some posts over on ThinkSpot and getting lots of traction. One thing I will say I really like about ThinkSpot is there's, it's called ThinkSpot. So you get a lot more intellectual engagement rather than, on some of these social media platforms where it's just either trolls or, political activists that just want to insult and deride you and play the gaslighting game constantly. That can be very infuriating. But yeah, if you go to follow me over there on ThinkSpot, Canadian Libertarian on ThinkSpot, yeah, you'll see like not only have I been making it more of a point to do more posts in the written form, and some of the articles that I have written actually are quite long in nature. And especially in particular when you're talking about what it is to be a free human being, the myth of authority, one of my posts, the 4-question quest for freedom, explaining collectivism and its many, many iterations, whether you're talking about fascism, Nazism, communism, socialism, and such, right? Or even democratic socialism or democracies. Once again, any system that is set up to sacrifice the individual for the concept. Once again, it's a concept. It never really exists in the real world. It's just a trick to manipulate people into believing, right? Oh, that the masses should rightfully rule. Well, once again, not necessarily. That's just mob rule, right? At least in the West, historically, the way our documentation in terms of the Bill of Rights or the Constitution of the U.S. and stuff were written is there may be a semblance of some kind of mob rule in terms of the voting populace, whether you're talking about the Electoral College or in Canada, the first past the post system. But there was supposed to be those disclaimers in there that, okay, the majority can vote on things, but not when it comes to trying to deny or override people's fundamental, inherent, inalienable rights. That used to be understood in most of our countries, in most of the Western countries, not that long ago, right? Less than a century ago, most people understood that, no, you don't get to vote. Right? First of all, you're not supposed to have any pretense of authority to vote to take away stuff from your neighbor and redistribute it forcefully to give to other people, nor do you have any fundamental right or authority to impose your will on your neighbors. You know, the state of what it was supposed to be, its original intent in terms of Western, individualistic type societies it was supposed to be the night watchman state, basically the referee. So it wasn't there, to divvy up rights or authorities and all that stuff. It was just to be, once again, the referee in case someone infringed on other people's rights, and a means to arbitrate or come to the decision of what the ultimate punishment should be. And once again, even that had multiple layers of protections at the individual level. So you're innocent until proven guilty, right? And you have the right to have a lawyer afforded to you, so you don't just have to try to defend yourself in a system that they themselves early on understood. Well, yeah, the judge, the prosecutor, all this stuff, they're all part of the apparatus of the state. So at the very least, we should give, the people that we're trying to, put in the system where we have all the power, all the controls and mechanisms and levers of power. Well, at the very least, we should give, a right to a fair and speedy trial, and all the things, like I say, that came as a consequence of 800 plus years, all the way from Magna Carta, that was a concept invented or a common law kind of concept, back that was started back 800 years ago. But like I said, all these hundreds of years later we're so far removed in this modern world from all of those things, to the point where, yes, successive generations are literally, or we're all living at the will of political edict, just like living under any kind of tyrant or ruling elite. It is, whether it's a minority or majority, we live under. It could be the tyranny in terms of the minority, in terms of actual numbers, which is the Trudeau regime. The majority of Canadians did not vote for Trudeau. The plurality of Canadians who chose to vote gave him a minority government. But once again, they circumvented the will of the people, which were at least wise enough to keep him in check to some degree by not giving a majority government. But the NDP under Jagmeet Singh basically did an end go around that to circumvent the will of the people, and now have created, basically their own modern form of a quasi-majority by simple fact of giving them the supply agreement. Whereas, we'll prop you out as long as you give us a cut of all that wealth that you're trying to redistribute from not just Canadians alive today, but future and successive generations, because all these things aren't being paid for currently. They're being placed on the old proverbial credit card, which is you as the taxpayer, or even if you think you're avoiding it by not being a taxpayer in some way, inflation, anything you buy or consume, right? Any service that you use is being affected by that inflation, which affects us all. And then once again, that's just by inflation and that forceful wealth and income redistribution, but it's also being imposed on people that don't even have the ability to vote, the ones who aren't even born or alive today, namely the unborn and successive generations who are going to have these kind of debts and deficits thrust upon them. Like, so even if you believe in the social contract, which once again is a pure abstract myth that can be provenly so, I recommend reading Lysander Spooner or look through some of my past videos as it pertains to that. But even if you're a believer of the social contract, well, how is there a social contract when you're imposing debts and deficits on people that aren't even alive to enter into this mythical social contract, right? So that everything is ruled by edict, and it's just a way to appease those who are part and parcel or connected to the ruling class, and imposing the cost rather than imposing the cost on the people alive today who might get pissed off and up in arms if they actually had to pay for all this stuff and actually truly rebel. Well, once again, if you can offload that cost on the people who aren't even alive today, well, then a lot more people are more willing to go along to get along. And that's what we're seeing today. Anyways, let me just check on the on Gord here, see how he's doing. So yeah, maybe Gord, once again, he might not be able to get back to us, which would be a shame. But like I say, at least, like I say, I'll post a link to his Substack, and I'll also post a link to his Twitter account so that you folks can check them out. And like I say, give him a follow. I definitely recommend, or at least while he still has well, that's the thing. Now that Elon Musk is running X, there's a much less chance of being canceled on that particular platform, at least. And I mean, I can say that with truth and honesty because, yeah, I post the kind of stuff. As you know, this is actually being live streamed right now on X. And yeah, it's not being taken down. I'm not placed in the same kind of situation that Facebook does, where they're constantly trying to penalize me without even really giving me any way to push back against them or to have, you know, my channel not negatively affected by all this weird craziness stuff that's taking place. Like I say, I've noticed that on Facebook that boy, they will definitely mess with you. And I can't help but think there are probably people, you know, maybe, you know, doing that intentionally to try to suppress the kind of content that I produce and provide, because I do see that my Facebook page, you know, it does get quite a bit of traction. I get, you know, thousands and thousands of people that I reach every month over on Facebook, even in spite of all that suppression. So that might very well be why I'm being suppressed. Whereas over on X, you know, like I don't get a huge following over on X. You know, this live stream on X might only get seen by a handful of people. So there's no real reason to suppress my content when it's just somewhere in obscurity and nobody's seen it anyways, right? But actually, yeah, I should do that now. Maybe link or put that stuff in the link while, like I say, while we're giving it a few more minutes and see if Gord gets a chance to come back. I'll just see if I can link some of this stuff. View my channel. Okay. Where are we at here? Okay. Why? There we go. So actually, yeah, I will just go in for now. And I do see there's a few people that are watching on most of the platforms, but I will actually place them at the very top. Gord's, once again, Gord's Substack. I will place that in the top in the description of the live stream. And I will also put a link to his X account. So like I say, so you folks can follow him over there and see what else he has to say. Because like I say, he's got lots of great content. Definitely well worth it. So actually, let me just type that in here. Links to Gord's Substack. Whoops. And X profile below. Yeah. So like I say, that's all shared over there on YouTube, and I'll make sure to share that on the other platforms as well. So as you folks know, this is being live streamed to Facebook, X, Rumble, YouTube, and Odyssey as well. So I got lots of redundancy there. And once again, I appreciate anyone that's watching this, no matter what the platform that you're watching this on. I really appreciate you folks for taking the time out of your day to check out my live streams. I really appreciate that. Actually, I am just going to check and see if there's anyone that actually is commenting over there on Rumble. No, it doesn't look like there's any comments taking place over on Rumble. Anyways, but I do appreciate the folks that are watching over there. Like I say, I understand not everyone wants to comment. Some people just like to sit back and listen, and I'm all grateful no matter which one you do decide. So yeah, I think though, I'm pretty sure that we've kind of lost Gord here. And once again, it's okay. I'll reach out to him and we'll have a conversation again some point in time. It's not like we're going to run out of material, right? That's the one thing about the ruling class and their media mouthpieces and their so-called experts, right? And the kind of rule by edict implementation that's been taking place and will continue to take place for the foreseeable future is, they leave us with a lot to talk about. Anyways, I'll get back into a few more of the comments, and then, like I say, it's an hour and 34 minutes. I'll check out some more of your comments, and then I'll tie this one up. So another one by Dave Dismantled. Why worry about genocide in Gaza when there is a Netflix series to binge on or a TikTok video? Dave, yeah, man, after my own heart, man. You think just like me, seemingly, but yeah, right. As long as we can be distracted by bread and circuses, which, I mean, that quote goes all the way back to the Roman Empire. So it just goes to show you that when it comes to that stuff, there's not much new under the sun, right? That's literally how they keep people complacent and going along with this stuff is, yes, they just give you bread and circuses, right? So when people think, well, look, I got all these things, right? Yeah, but that's not out of some act of benevolence or because they care about you. They want you to remain complacent, so they can socially, engineer society, economically manipulate and coerce and steal from and plunder and redistribute. So they can do all that. And you'll just convince yourself, well, hey, as long as I can watch that Netflix special, all's well that ends well, right? But once again, we know how that ultimately unfolds if done for a long enough time. And yeah, trust me, it don't work out well for anybody in the long run. Or the ones who it does work out for well, it's not you, folks. It's not you. Did you buy any Ethereum? Actually, Tantrum Mashar, thanks for joining the live stream. Actually, I never get into the Ethereum, unfortunately. I do have a little bit of Bitcoin. Mostly all that was donations early on back in the day when people would donate to the YouTube channel and my Bitcoin wallet. And I did buy for a while just for the hell of it. And I still have a bunch of that. The Doge, right? Not sure what, I don't even, once again, I'm a hodl kind of guy. I didn't do it to play any manipulation or to get into it to do any scheming or, to benefit myself at other people's expense, right? I recognize that it's something that's not just a hedge against inflation and the current fiat system, but it's also I want to support these people in the community, the Bitcoin community, who have worked really hard to make sure we have an alternative means of transactions and some kind of a store of value and stuff. So yeah, I'm a hodl kind of guy, and once again, not looking to benefit myself at other people's expenses. I just want to see if I can play some small role in some way of heaven or supporting that alternative way of, once again, protecting ourselves from, that's the other thing. Think about if a CBDC comes to exist at some point in time, right? And it's in the rumblings. It's definitely, they're talking about this kind of stuff. So yeah, I definitely recommend that people, and once again, I'm not telling you to invest, but I'm just saying, like, some of these alternative cryptocurrencies, in particular Bitcoin, right? It is really important that we do at least have some way to hedge or some alternative way, right, to deal with each other economically, where there is no central authority, where they can't manipulate, where it's encrypted through AES encryption and stuff, right? And where you truly are protected, at least to a substantial degree, from the tentacles of the state. And actually, now that we're talking about economics, I will just say I was watching Tim Mullen, his live stream just the other day. Actually, let me bring that up. Actually, here, I'll close out the that, and I'll bring up Tim Mullen's, because I was watching it, and it was actually a great video. I think you'll get lots of great information out of that, and as it pertains to the our current fiat system and how detrimental that truly can be. Where is it? Why is that not coming right up? That should have came right up. There we go. Okay, so I'll just bring this on here. I'll bring it onto the live stream. And like I said, I definitely recommend, because just like my channel, Tim Mullins, right? We're kind of, we don't get as much of an audience as I think we should, because we don't play the clickbaity thing in terms of our titles and stuff. And we don't play the politics and team red versus team blue and stuff. We talk about things at the fundamental level, like the big picture, the macro aspects, the philosophy behind things, like, and big things in terms of, our economic system, right? And it can kind of sound boring to some people, but let me tell you, this is the kind of stuff that can truly educate and inform you. And like I say, if you just watch this, and it's only an hour long, episode 47, former MP exposes CBDC agenda. And once again, I definitely recommend you check that one out. I was watching it on my other, on a TV that has a different account, which is why I didn't already have this liked. So now I'll have that put up on this channel, or I mean, not put up, but I'll have that where I've seen it on this channel and my other channel. Anyways, I'm just going to read a couple more comments. Oh, let me bring that off there. But yeah, I definitely recommend you check that one out. I'll just read a few more comments here. X is still flawed. I believe you're absolutely right on that, Undead Quinn. And once again, that's me. I know. And sometimes I kind of am my own worst enemy. I should be more alarmist at times, although I hate to use that term. But in terms of some of the things that happen and take place, because I do still feel like my content is greatly suppressed for the most part. And it's weird how some of the things seem to get traction that I post, whereas a lot of the things that I personally consider really important don't necessarily. And I really wonder about that. But once again, because I can't know that with any objective clarity or a factual basis, I kind of tend to lean on the side of, maybe it's me. I don't know, because once again, I can't offload the personal responsibility, because I do see that others get quite popular followings or traction with a sizable audience in comparison contrast to me. So sometimes I just chalk that up as, well, maybe it's just me. maybe it's my personality, maybe it's the way I deal with things. I don't know, I can't pretend to know, but trust me, I do get quite curious about how things play out these days. I really do. Oh yeah, right on, Dave. Yeah, no problem. Got to split. Have a good one, folks. Yeah, thank you once again for joining the stream. Really appreciate that. I don't trust Elon. I think he's a wolf. Well, that's the thing. How would you know? Could be completely Machiavellian in nature. I can't say I know, but some parts of me kind of thinks that maybe not so. Maybe not so. I don't know. Once again, there's no way I can possibly know that. So I try to trust, but at the same time, I'm not blind, right? I'm still apprehensive and still willing to cast judgment when any evidence is presented towards me. I'm not an ideologue. I'm not an idol worshiper, right? And like I say, I'll call people out no matter who they are when I see they're doing something that I believe to be unethical or counter to what the things that matter most to me, which is human flourishing and freedom and bringing real meaning in their life and stuff, right? And having freedom of speech. Machine, I don't understand. Okay, let's see. Yeah, same as the old boss. Well, I mean, once again, that's always a possibility. Anyways, folks, so yeah, we're at the 143 mark. So I think I will tie this up. I really appreciate all you folks, like I say, that did join the live stream. I'll be reaching out, probably going to do a few more here, in short order. I ain't going to stay away for very long. Oh, I will see. There's just someone else here. Hey, Bennett, FB is down, so had time to hop on here. Great job. Oh, really? Facebook's down, huh? Well, that's great that you got a chance to hop on here. Sorry that's a little bit late, and I'm actually just getting ready to tie this one up. But if you want, you can check this out after the fact, because, yeah, my live streams all stay up on all the platforms, and you can always watch it at any time. Little bits at a time if you want. Maybe when you're got a little bit of time on your hands, check it out maybe later. And yeah, thanks to you as well, Jim Nicole. Have a great day. Cheers. Thanks, like I say, to the rest of you fine folks. We'll see you in the next live stream. This is the Canadian Libertarian. Oh, and Gord, if you get a chance to see this, man, sorry about how it all turned out there. Sorry about your internet connection, but we'll get a chance to talk again. And I look forward to doing so. So have a great day, you and everyone else. Canadian Libertarian.